Chase Burrows walked onto the set with a fair amount of trepidation. He had been thinking about his wife, Maria Burrows, all the previous night and had trouble falling asleep. Today's afternoon shoot was set to captivate Hollywood talking heads and celebrities for weeks after the episode aired. So to speak, city chatter. But Chase wasn't just there to watch his wife perform and provide her with moral support. The couple got married shortly after meeting on the set of the film. Shut up. The cop spoof film was not very successful, but in addition to meeting Maria, his future stunning wife, the role launched Chase's career as an in-demand leading man. The first 2 years of their marriage were, in fact, very challenging by normal standards. Chase was away more often than he was home. He was constantly worried that his beautiful partner would go astray. Hollywood does this to people a lot, and he was naturally afraid of it. Scrupulousness, monogamy, fidelity, and especially long-term relationships were all too rare, and most often ignored in the land of glitter and shine. On top of that, Chase knew he was playing with a lit match, if not a keg of dynamite when it came to his wife. Her family had money. Thanks to this and her appearance, she was rarely denied anything, even at an early age. Maria was the apple of her father's eye and was spoiled beyond belief. The fact that she received these privileges before arriving in Hollywood was not an easy ordeal, but Chase loved her and hoped for the best. In addition, the newlyweds managed to get several small roles, and her agent quickly got her noticed and began to appear in the media. But the first 2 years, despite all the concerns, were not disappointing. Not only had they overcome the initial difficulties, but by all accounts, both publicly and privately, they were still in a honeymoon state. One day, Maria sat up in bed after a marathon round of explosive sex and asked Chase what he thought about starting a family. His first thought was surprise that she even asked. She's not used to little things like permission. Chase liked the idea. Creating another little man with this female goddess was something everyone dreams of. Matthew was born 4.5 months ago, but Chase's relationship with Maria changed dramatically the month she found out she was pregnant. She acted loving and genuinely cared for her husband, with one exception, and Chase saw it for what it was: acting. The couple had a long break in their current project. The second season of Despair Island wrapped up this week. They were #1 rated in their Tuesday time slot, and the Emmys were quite plausible for Chase, the character of John Franklin, and his wife Maria, the character of Lara Franklin. The other main character was Sven. In the series, he was just Sven, but the actor's name was Duck Bronson. When Chase first got the call about Despair Island, he was battling traffic on Highway 101 on his way home from Studio City for his wife's birthday. He had big plans, but as usual, the chaotic Southern California lifestyle got in the way. Almost at the same time, Maria's agent was talking to her on the phone, oddly enough, to ask if she would be interested in playing the female lead opposite her real-life husband. Both were ecstatic with the good news when Chase arrived home, but were unable to dine at Chez Françoise. Instead, DoorDash delivered their favorite Chinese food and 2 bottles of good wine. In their glory, DoorDash returned 2 hours later with a ton of caramel desserts and cakes. Chase loved caramel, especially licking it off his wife's naked body. Working on a real set, which was either actually on a small rugged island or was designed to be so, was very challenging for Maria during her pregnancy. Chase worried about her and often rubbed her back or legs sympathetically at night. Chase asked, then almost demanded, that the directors keep her on a flat, hard surface as often as possible. Unfortunately, this became increasingly difficult as the writers increasingly escalated the ardent secret romance between Lara Franklin and Sven. They just needed to sneak away somewhere and not into a makeshift tent. With their busy work schedules, Maria and Chase rarely had time to discuss what they thought about the plot points in the series. Chase, of course, didn't like how the big guy seemed to treat his wife like a man, but everything about their scenes was very professional and on point. There wasn't much to complain about except the nagging feelings in Chase's head. The week of Matthew's birthday provided a much-needed break for the couple, apart from his birthday itself. Family and friends were politely asked to give them some time to be with the child. Both sets of parents knew they would see their grandson often, given Maria and Chase's line of work. The only constant obstacle was the couriers showering the couple with flowers and other gifts. Even Duck Bronson sent flowers and a sentimental card. The following week, Chase returned to work. Marie was scheduled to be offset for 3 weeks and then return for the final 4 scenes of the second season, including the big Ducksven scene leading into the 3rd season. During the first week and into the second, Chase began to feel restless. He couldn't explain what was happening. The people he worked with every day seemed to treat him differently. He was asked to share photos of the little toddler, and Chase happily shared. But something was wrong. There were whispers, and they stopped whenever someone noticed Chase in close proximity. Several times he even took out his phone and turned the camera to see if there was anything on his face or nose. The worries and whispers died down almost completely over the next 2 weeks, leading up to Maria's return and the long-awaited conclusion of the season. It seemed to Chase that everything was back to normal. Now he stood behind the director's desk again, ready to watch his wife give what he half hoped, half feared would be a stellar performance. There are already rumors at the studio that the programs have expired. None of them have been confirmed. Additionally, Season 2 had a lot of buzz about infidelity and the general theme of cuckolding. Directors and producers dismissed the rumors as mere Hollywood gossip, although none of them denied the rumors. Failure, after just 2 seasons, would be very bad. Bad for all concerned. The actors would be subject to gossip, and the studio would likely suffer losses. While Chase was a little anxious, Maria was nervous. She hinted, not so subtly, that it would have been better if Chase wasn't on set for the scene. Nonsense, he told her unequivocally. He told her that he loved her, that she was his wife, and what it would be like if he wasn't there to support her. He added that they are both in the business, and it's all part of their chosen profession. She told him that she might not be up to the task, knowing that her husband was off camera, watching her passionately kiss, hug, and essentially roll around in the warm sand for several minutes, almost naked, with another man. Duck was wearing only boxers, and she was wearing a rather shabby bikini, which she took from the suitcase of one of the unabled women back in the first season. Unlike the mostly vanilla kissing scenes leading up to the season finale, this scene was meant to be very sexy and passionate. The set will be closed, to the main crew only, in case there is a wardrobe malfunction. But Maria's nervousness was not due to fear that one of her breasts might pop out of the suit. She was concerned about how realistic the performance might look. While she was trying to perform the performance of her life for her job, Maria knew that she would have to perform a separate and very different performance for her husband, and the others present who knew her well. Of course, Maria had talked to Duck privately about the scene. Once, during her first week at home with the newborn, and to make sure she got her message across to his thick skull, 2 days before their scene. "Don't ruin my marriage, Duck," she told him surprisingly without emotion. "No macho bullshit, and try to make it look uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time. You understood me?" Duck did understand, at least to some extent. Maria knew she had explained herself as best she could, and now she had to help him remember as they rode along the beach. Duck might look like a Scandinavian Neanderthal, but she also knew he was pretty smart. His large stature and Nordic features made him much more suitable for a role in Game of Thrones than for Desolation Island. The 7-minute scene, which was cut down to 2.5 after editing, went off without a hitch. Maria breathed a sigh of relief and thought, "God bless," when the director said cut. She didn't even look at Duck as she hurried away from the camera, wanting to quickly get to her husband to hug him. But any thoughts or actions by anyone on set were suppressed, and the executive producer, other producers, and directors gathered for a post-production meeting. Maria found her husband's hand as they gathered in the shade of the folding tent. Sal Rothenstein addressed the group directly. "Great scene, Maria and Duck," he began. "I have news for all of you. The rest of the cast and crew will be informed by the end of today. You've all heard the rumors. Unfortunately, they turned out to be true last night. The TV channel decided that this was our last season. There were whoops, gasps, and grunts as Sal tried to regain the group's attention. I know this is disappointing," Sal continued. For me too, but hey, it's show business. Executives don't see enough longevity in the script as it stands now to produce 12 new episodes for a third season. They want to go out on a high note. Right now, we have work to do to bring the series finale to a close. I have rewritten scripts here for tomorrow's filming. There are major edits for John Franklin, Lara Franklin, and several others. Duck Bronson has about 2 minutes of dialogue changes. I expect you all to remain professional and for the main characters to spend this evening reviewing their scripts. I want to finish my work tomorrow or the day after tomorrow at the latest. So, Sal said in conclusion, I have invited a caterer to provide you with evening meals in your room, so order whatever you want. See you on set tomorrow morning. Maria listened attentively to Sal and squeezed Chase's hand more and more tightly. She understood what this could mean for her husband's career. She had no idea how bad the next 24 to 48 hours would actually be. Chase's story. My day was turning to shit so quickly and in ways I couldn't imagine. The love scene between Duck and my wife was executed perfectly, almost perfectly, from my point of view, and perhaps from the point of view of some of the other cast members. The problem for me was that I was watching their forced acting while trying to maintain the pretense for the director. I came to the conclusion that there were 2 different levels of acting going on. I also wanted, with all my being, not to believe it. Maria finally got out of her depression. I sure as hell hoped it had something to do with Matthew's birth. To say that Maria has been noticeably distracted over the past 8 months would be an understatement. Most of the time, she was on edge. Hormones and at least a half-dozen other legitimate reasons could be the cause or part of the cause, but I still had to consider the possibility that it might be what I was afraid of. To say I was stressed after Matthew was born would be an understatement. We did not immediately find a common language, as I read about. Something was wrong. It was just a feeling inside me, but I had a terrible feeling that something was wrong. In those first weeks, when Maria stayed home with Matthew, she would call me on FaceTime and I would get the same feeling. He didn't look like me, but he was a newborn. It was something else, perhaps emptiness. When I was alone in my trailer at night, I thought about who Matthew was like. I had to suppress these thoughts for my own peace of mind. We ordered from the delivery menu. She must have been hungry after the scene with Duck, but I didn't think I could eat much, so I ordered an Italian sandwich and pasta salad. On the way back to the hotel, Maria said almost nothing. She was clearly deep in thought. Honey, she began, should we call the realtor and withdraw the offer on Malibu Heights? We have no idea how this will affect our immediate future. At first glance, this might seem like a sensitive issue, but I knew Maria well enough to know that she was being selfish. After all, she was a product of her own upbringing. I simply answered maybe. At least she could tell that I had a lot on my plate and left it at that. Back at the hotel, I took a quick shower while Maria headed to Starbucks in the lobby. The next surprise of the day came when I sat down to eat the sandwich that had been delivered to me and opened the sealed script. The caramel macchiato I was holding hit the opposite wall, spilling its hot, sticky contents across the ivory white upholstery of the expensive armchairs directly below it. The sandwich, although tasty, was not wrapped very tightly, and began to fall apart even as it left my outstretched hand. A variety of cold cuts, shredded lettuce and cheese covered the distance to the elusive goal. Maria recoiled and stared at me in shock. Should I even open mine? She asked with trepidation. She never got an answer because my phone was on and I was dialing Sal on the speed dial. Sal, I shouted in tension. What the hell is this? Calm down, Chase, he replied, as if expecting my call. This is exactly what it sounds like. And before you go on a tirade, you need to understand that I did this for you, at least partially. It won't be clear tomorrow or in the days to come, but I guarantee you will see it in your near future, and you will call to thank me. So don't screw it up by missing out on this call. What does this even mean? I asked, resigned to the fact that Sal had laid it all out, preempting me as usual. I can't tell, Sal said in a quieter voice. Not now. You just have to trust me. I have your best interests at heart, and not because I'm your white knight. You are a natural talent, and I am already looking forward to the next project we will be involved in together. Now, calm down, eat something, and read these lines so that tomorrow you can nail them down like your life depends on it. In a sense, this is true. Sal hung up, and Maria was next to me in an instant. I wish I could say she was there to comfort me, but I was still holding the script in my hands, and she was eagerly trying to read it. About 4 paragraphs later, she saw the words that prompted me to call, and her face turned ashen. "What did he say?" she asked, uncertainty. "He said, 'Deal with it,'" I growled. "What a fucking oxymoron. You better open yours." Maria did just that, and if up to that moment the mood was gloomy, then after that we found ourselves in uncharted waters. The final scenes, originally conceived by the script and announced as a kind of duel between John and Sven for Lara's heart, turned around 180 degrees. Lara tells Sven that the child is his, but then one of the minor female characters, who has his eye on John, overhears and denounces the pair of adulterers. John confronts Sven in an angry but not very prepared way, and gets a beating from his larger, stronger lover. In the final scene, John cries and whines about his unfaithful wife while sitting on the highest point of the island, just before he jumps off and commits suicide. My character was essentially emasculated, and the only option was to accept it. Then I had to play it, with amazing precision. I felt that my heart would not be in it. As I began to come to terms with the next 24 hours, I began to learn a little about my wife. I realized that she was behaving unusually. She had been acting strange all day, going through a range of emotions. "What happened, Maria?" I asked, a little annoyed. "Lara seems to be coming out of the situation much better than John." Maria looked up and smiled faintly. "I don't know, Chase," she replied thoughtfully. "I think this whole thing sucks. Who the hell writes this shit anyway? I don't think any of the characters will appear in a good light. A bunch of obsessive, self-centered narcissists and a dead main character." Mary had a knack for saying the obvious. Was she worried about her career or mine? I wasn't sure of either, judging by the range of emotions crossing her upset but pretty face. "I don't see anything here where Lara jumps off a cliff or sacrifices her cheated ass to the volcano gods or anything like that," I told her sarcastically. "Why would she do that?" Maria asked, looking puzzled. "She made a mistake. Her punishment will be her dead husband, but the audience will never see it, so it will be empty holiness." "To hell with this," I answered incredulously. "She has sex with Sven and then gives birth to his child." "No, Chase," she said sadly and softly. "You know that according to the script they only had sex once?" She regrets this and should have asked John for forgiveness in season 3. Here, after Lara finds out that her conversation with Sven was transferred to John, she goes in search of him to explain everything, but it is too late. "Certainly." That was my eloquent answer. From my gloomy answer, Maria realized that it was better to end everything there. We were both sitting in the same room, but that evening we were as separated as a couple could be, lost in our thoughts and exploring our new lines. Maria ran her hands seductively over my chest as we settled into bed. She had her own way of calming me down with slow, loving sex or quick romp. However, the day took its toll, and Remington Steele, as we called it, was not ready for this night. "Come on, baby," Maria whispered to me. "Mommy is still on edge. Do you want me back?" "Yeah, just like that. Mr. Steele will go on the Concorde to Heathrow." For a woman as smart as I thought Maria was, and assuming this was an attempt at humor, she clearly lacked brains when it came to her hubby's masculinity and pride. "Sorry, baby," I told her, feigning compassion. "You can try, but I doubt he'll be willing to comply." She actually tried it, about 2.5 minutes. Then she shrugged and rolled over, probably expecting me to hold her more comfortably. The next morning, of course, I was not very rested and not in the best shape. Maria was also not in a good mood. She usually had her own ways of getting me out of depression, but in the last few days she couldn't do it. She looked, was it sympathy or concern? She tried to make small talk on the way from the hotel to the set. I answered in monosyllables. On the way to the dressing room, she started playing Ave Maria. "Chase," she began in a soothing voice. "Just try harder today, honey. We'll get through this. In a month, you'll sign a new contract, and this stupid little show will be a thing of the past. Let's finish and go home to be with our baby." Maria went to her trailer, and I went to mine. 40 minutes later, we were together again. Watching my stunt double fight another stunt double, playing Sven. Anyone with even a few years of Hollywood experience could tell that this whole fight scene was rushed and rushed. I didn't see him, but Duck snuck up behind Maria and me and suddenly shouted to the director to film. "What kind of amateurish crap is this?" he muttered, dissatisfied. "You call this a fight, damn it?" He wasn't wrong, but then he made the mistake of his life. "Why don't you let Chase and I go in there?" he said to everyone who could hear. "The script says beating. I'll show you what a damn good beating looks like." Then he looked straight at me and grinned. I first met Duck a week before we started reading lines for the show. Although he was never a good friend, Duck and I were friends. Maria and I went out for drinks with him and his then-girlfriend, before Maria was pregnant. I helped him after his car was totaled by a friend he lent it to, picking him up for 2 weeks straight and taking him to the studio with us. For this, Duck bought Maria and me a weekend trip to Catalina Island. He was, of course, a self-centered and overweight Scandinavian, but he also had a kind side that sometimes showed. He was a bull in a china shop and proud of it. If it weren't for that smirk, all the strange feelings I've been experiencing lately would never have come together. Not my wife's behavior, not all those whispers and interrupted conversations of my fellow actors when Maria was home with our newborn. Suddenly, her strange looks from the previous day were right on par with Duck's smirk. I tried with every fiber of my being to brush it aside, to push it aside, like in Island of Despair. But I could not. I turned away from him, glancing in the opposite direction. Maria looked at me worriedly, perhaps desperately would be a better word, and then gave Duck an angry look. I hardly remember the rest of that day. Several times my scene on the mountaintop was cut off and started again. I was neither sharp nor focused. Of course, I had less than 12 hours to memorize my lines for the final episode. My final scene took place at sunset, on top of an island rock, which in reality to me was a green screen on top of a plastic mountain about 2 meters high, with a soft elastic material around the base. I didn't dive like a swan. The managers decided that I should just feel sorry for myself and then just roll over. I found the ending of this show so disgusting that I could barely say goodbye to the cast and crew, and just tell the leaders to go to hell. Maria constantly poked me in the ribs and whispered, "Damn, Chase, you're embarrassing me." What the hell happened? While the rest of the crew wished each other well and hugged each other. I headed toward the taxi service, outside the set. Duck came up to me as I was leaving after filming the final scene. He pulled my hand. "Chase," he said apologetically. "Hey kid, great job. Sorry for what I said earlier, you know. It's just that my big mouth and temper got in my way. Don't be offended, I didn't mean anything like that. Why don't you and Maria catch me later in the week and we can have dinner?" "Nope," I replied sarcastically. "I think we're fine as is. Now that this shit show is over, we have a baby at home to spend time with. Good luck." I never shook his hand, and Maria looked puzzled until the shuttle took us back to our car at the hotel. Then, apparently, she decided that anything she said would go wrong, so I was treated in silence the rest of the way to the airport. When we arrived home 7 hours later, I spoke with our nanny and discussed changes to the schedule for the next few weeks. Then I walked into the nursery, and Maria was breastfeeding Matthew. It's amazing how much a baby's appearance changes in the first few months. His mother spent the first 3 weeks with him. I haven't seen him, except for a few minutes on FaceTime, for 5.5 weeks. I studied that little face. He certainly had his mother's looks, chiseled cheekbones and blue eyes. But I had brown eyes. So what were the odds? Matthew's hair was blonde, like Mary's. Another person who had blonde hair and blue eyes was Duck. I wanted to leave. I wanted to go and buy myself a double helping of Maker's Mark and forget this whole shitty week. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I slowly looked down at little Matthew's feet. They were real oars, amazingly huge for a newborn, and he had gnarled fingers. My legs were thin, and I wore a size 41.5. I had long, thin fingers. You know, the ones with extra dominoes. Just like Maria. We've been barefoot on set for over 2 years now. I'm not a Bigfoot person, but when you're sitting at lunch or on a technical break, it's hard not to notice that everyone is working in swimsuits. That evening, Maria went to bed long before me. She was exhausted, or so she said. I was drunk. My wife wanted to talk the next morning without even giving me a chance to be hungover. She wanted to help me get over the shock of the show and everything that happened. I told her that I was fine and didn't need her help. She got a little angry at my attitude and decided to take offense, saying that she was just trying to help and I shouldn't be so insensitive. That was until I left her. She followed me to my Maserati and demanded that I come back to the house and spend time with her and Matthew. For the first time in our marriage, I disobeyed. "Leave me alone and leave me alone," I raged. Instead, I went to breakfast and ate a lot of bacon. Thoughts about my Hollywood figure were not on the agenda that day. I started making important notes on my phone, then emailed them to my personal account and erased them from my phone. In my opinion, there was no point in getting ahead of myself until one very important thing had been proven. That thing was Matthew's ancestry, and it required a smear test. No, 2 tests, one for him and one for me. The evidence had to be irrefutable in any case, that is, whether he was my son or not. Just one day after I woke up, I was already opening my mind to the fact that Maria could become pregnant by practically anyone. If I were the father, then at least Maria would have to admit her relationship with Duck Bronson. Depending on how bad it was, I would have to make my own decisions. Maybe we would go to counseling, or maybe something more permanent. But if I wasn't the father, I needed to start defending myself now. My career depended on Hollywood moguls. Scandal in this business can sometimes be good for your career, but after Despair Island ended, I would have been a laughingstock. However, contracts were also an important part of Hollywood. My marriage to Maria was truly a contract. I made a note to use this word to the end in all my transactions. This also meant that I would have to find a good lawyer. The second and perhaps more serious problem was Mary's family. Moreover, the wealth and power of her father, Charles Wilmington. This guy has always been partial to me. This was partly due to the fact that he despised the idea of his daughter becoming an actor or artist of any kind. He considered fine art completely useless for society. He considered me the same. In short, he made no effort to hide his complete contempt for me and often tried to control my words and actions. In return, he received my middle finger and an equal challenge. He had a commanding presence, but I had a quick mind that he simply could not match, which irrevocably brought us to a permanent impasse. So I decided that he would do everything to mitigate any public shame for Maria, while he used his power to publicly destroy me. But he was also an option for further developments. I will begin preparing my own anti-smear campaign and, if necessary, name him. My phone rang and I saw it was Sal. I thought about sending it to voicemail, but maybe, "Hey Sal," I said stoically, "what can I do for you?" "I guess that's more like, what I can do for you, my boy," he said with a deep grin. "Stop by the studio, okay? There is a package for you on my table. Just tell my administrative assistant who you are, and she'll get it for you. I don't think the content needs any explanation, but you know how to contact me if you have questions or want to talk. All the best." It was Sal. So unique. However, it was quite an ominous conversation and my curiosity was piqued. So off I went to the studio. 45 minutes later, I received my studio bonus, according to my early withdrawal clause. There was an 11 by 14-inch poster of the cast and crew of Despair Island, autographed, of course. Then I think there was another extra bag that I dropped into my lap. There were 2 DNA swab tests lying there, and I suffocated. Was he really controlling my smartphone? I asked myself a question. My quick return call to Sal went straight to voicemail, which was normal. I went to the bank and spent an hour setting up a new account and transferring a significant portion of our money into it. We weren't poor, quite the contrary, so she didn't notice anything. Well, she didn't notice right away. Then I went home to face a shitstorm. Maria's condescending attitude disappeared, and she was very accommodating during dinner. After dinner, I spent time with both her and Matthew, and the conversation was light, with her only trying to broach the subject of my behavior a few times. I just told her I felt better and apologized for being upset. I wasn't sure if she realized that I didn't say sorry for how I treated her. I was able to put Matthew to bed, citing the fact that I had only been able to do this once since his birth. I checked all his features one more time before running 2 cotton swabs across his cheek. I did the same for myself and placed them in the correct tubes, sealing them when finished. I realized that I would be sad if he was not mine, even though he had just been born. Maria was watching one of our competing shows on another channel and invited me to sit next to her. She quickly pressed herself against my chest. During the commercial break, Maria looked into my eyes. "Chase," she said tenderly, "please don't shut me out. I know this must be hard for you. I'm supposed to be here for you. I'm your wife, remember?" I did remember. And it also seemed strange to me that there was not a single affectionate word in her sentence. This made me remember the recent past. How long has this been going on? I asked myself a question. "And you love me?" I said instead of asking, actually finishing her sentence for her. "Yes," she answered perplexedly, perhaps puzzled by my answer. "Of course I love you. Are you worried about this? About my love for you, I mean? Well, it's not worth it. Do not dare. Whether you are a working actor or an unemployed actor, it has nothing to do with my love." To me, I did it again. The questioning look disappeared, replaced by a tense, worried one. "What do you mean?" she asked, starting to defend herself. "I just said it. My love for you. God, Chase, what's gotten into you? I mean, I know what's going on, but I've never seen you like this the last 2 days. Talk to me, please." I didn't want to overact. Everything must happen in order. I took a deep breath. "I'm very sorry," I said calmly. "I just didn't expect anything like this. Not the show, not Sal, not that bastard Duck." Her eyebrows rose even as she tried to hide it. That fucking ending was the worst of all. My chances of getting any future roles like Tom Cruise just decreased exponentially, while my chances of getting future roles like Danny DeVito increased greatly. In one damn day, they basically made my character into a fucking cuckolded weakling, and then I had to play it. I really think you should call your realtor tomorrow and put the finishing touches on the house in Malibu. This also caught Maria's attention and gave me the perfect opportunity to leave the first part of my rant. She thought about my proposal and became sad. "I know," she said dejectedly. "Do you have any ideas for something new? Did you call your agent today?" "No, Maria," I answered rudely. "I needed a day, okay? Just one day to think it over." "Of course. I will call him. Maybe tomorrow." The rest of our night was at least civil, but neither of us took a step closer to intimacy. The next morning, as I was getting out of the shower, Sal sent me a text. "I think I'll need to change the password on my phone today." He simply wrote, "You called?" Maria was breastfeeding, and I told her that I needed to go to the studio, maybe talk to Sal, but also pick up a package there. Then I went to my agent. I hated to lie like that, but I had to. "Hey, Sal, what's the news?" I used one of his semi-famous euphemisms. "Oh, I think you already know," Sal chuckled again. "Look, I'm not a good Samaritan, just to be clear. I have a new role lined up for you, if you're interested. It's on the drawing board now. The full writing team hasn't even been hired yet, but the idea is solid. In order for me to bring you on board, we're going to have to shed the skin of this fucking island fiasco. Erase your status as a blockhead. Got it? That's exactly what I did." "So how did you know?" I asked sharply. There was laughter on the phone again. "I never said I learned anything, my boy," he said cheerfully. "Actually, I didn't do it, not directly. I think what you're really asking is when." I didn't answer, and he continued. I learned about this from rumors. You should know this by now. If George fucking Burns turns over in his grave, I'll know. My boy, I've been working in this town since Sidney Poitier and John Wayne were box office hits. What I can tell you is that I didn't hear anything until Maria became pregnant. 2, maybe 3 months later. I can't tell if it's because Duck can't keep his mouth shut or because your wife has the same leg problem. Hell, I can't say for sure if they ever made a horizontal mambo, but I need my boy, Chase, back in the game for this new role, so you'll have to figure that out and take care of business. You know what I always say, a boa constrictor in a fist is like 2 on a tree. Sal was very, very good at all those timeless sayings. He was almost a prophet in our industry. At least that's what he told anyone and everyone who would listen. So you heard it was him? I said when Sal interrupted me. Of course it was him. Now he became more and more pompous and angrier. Who do you think it was? Listen, you stupid bastard. This girl loves you. But a freak like Bronson will keep working and working on a woman, any woman, until he gets what he wants. God, how I hate that Danish bastard. If I have my way, the only 2 lines in his future will be to use that stupid accent to say, kitchen, sorted in adbooking.com. I imagined the redness seeping in, starting from the sides of Sal's face. This man had terrible blood pressure. He simply continued, "Have you done the test?" he asked impatiently. "How long will it take to get results?" I told Sal for a week or 2. He got angry again when I told him that I used my home address to send the results. He told me to call his administrator and tell her the name of the lab, and she would change it to studio. He then talked about the new show. Family Matters is based on a real-life good guy, a family law attorney who has done his best to get justice in family court in the past. He did all this out of the kindness of his big heart and, of course, for the sake of self-respect. I will be playing the lead role. Dalton Roberts, LLD-esque. I was already mentally figuring out how to convince him to soften the tone of these letters for the sake of the audience. Sal was right. That's how he usually was, as I learned. I needed to get out from under this disgusting shit of despair. I asked if he knew a good divorce lawyer, and of course he did. I told him I'd call him as soon as we hung up to start researching the role. He didn't buy it. Sal must have been on the phone with Stoney Mayer while I was talking to the secretary. While I was making an appointment, I was transferred to Mr. Mayer and told to come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Stoney was good, despite his ridiculous name. He laid out the whole point and asked what I wanted to do anyway, if the DNA testing was completed. He mentioned that he knew Mary's father, Charles Wilmington. He also told me that Charles could cause a lot more problems than I thought. But he could have buried Duck Bronson, making him out to be a vile Hollywood misogynist and predatory womanizer. The more serious issue was Mary herself. I have no desire to destroy her, I said, surprisingly without emotion. If she had a one-time relationship with him, as a result of which she became pregnant, then she can simply move on with Dak, if that is what she wants. If she's been dating him this whole time or she wants to fight it, then you can go for the jugular. Okay, we'll figure it out, he said, smiling. The wheels were turning in his head. Celebrity divorce takes 3.5 minutes time, and on TMZ. If they want to mess with us, then we will spoon-feed them an affair with a celebrity, then whoever it was, on the same set, and an illegitimate child. It's a fucking gift that keeps on giving. Then he was restrained. I sincerely hope that the boy is yours, and that the rumors are just rumors. In any case, leave a check for $1,650 with my secretary on the way out. Over the next week, an uncomfortable relationship developed between Maria and me. She was quiet, wary, and it didn't give me peace. We still did what had always made us a strong couple, but it was superficial at best. We played with the child. We discussed our day. I talked about my agent and a few leads, but I never discussed the role Sal wanted for me. We also had sex, 3 times that week, to be exact. It was as forced as everything else we did. We both climaxed, but then again, we're both damn good actors, so. 8 days later, as I was leaving a strategy meeting with my agent, I received a call from Sal. I heard his assistant nearby. Chase, he began quickly, your results are here. I could hear a woman talking furiously in the background, possibly on another phone. She was very animated. Are you alone in your office? I asked. I heard shuffling and the sound of a door closing. Yes, he answered seriously. Can I open them? I would prefer... He cut me off. There's no time, he said urgently. Damn, Chase, we have a bigger problem here. My assistant, or the lab, screwed up. The written report was mailed here, but another copy was also sent to your home. Maria called here 3 times today, looking for you. I think you should open them before you end up in a pile of crap at home. Do it. There was the sound of paper being torn. Then a long pause. Come on, you old bastard, I thought. The sigh confirmed what I feared before he said a word. Matthew, he is not your son. I'm sorry, my boy. I don't remember if I said, thank you. I don't remember how I got home. I certainly didn't notice the 2 luxury cars in our large driveway, at least not until I got out of the car and walked past them. One of the cars belonged to Duck Bronson. The other was a city car. Seeing her there was unpleasant because it probably meant that Maria's parents were inside too. They were there, all gathered in the living room. Mother Mary was not among them. They stood when I entered and looked warily. Maria made no move to meet me. I stood in the lobby and took it all in. Then I laughed, half fake and half real, as I walked into my home. Our whole life is a theater, I began in my mocking, medieval voice. In it there are women, men, all actors. I looked around the room, then the kitchen and the hallway. Charles had so much money that he always needed personal security. They have their own exits and exits, I continued, looking into his eyes. And everyone plays more than one role. He rolled his eyes at me. Duck looked dumbfounded. I thought Shakespeare was from his continent. I saw only pain in Maria's eyes, so I focused on her. Where are you from? Adiger appeared in the air in front of me. I asked her in my usual tone. You handle addressed to me? Maria knew this phrase well. Tears began to roll down her swollen cheeks. Sit down. Actor, Charles demanded. Ah, I said sarcastically. It makes sense. Is Dad here to take control of the situation? Damage control, right? Be careful, Chuck. I am not one of your subordinates or stools. He didn't answer. The seating order was not very well thought out. Charles realized he was sitting in my chair and pointed to it, then crossed the room and pulled an elegantly upholstered chair towards him, rather dragged it, and placed himself and the chair between me and the 2 lovers. We were all just waiting for him to start. Here, he said, pointing to the envelope on the coffee table, is the postnuptial agreement, more precisely the clause on amendments to your marriage vows. It's heavily weighted in your favor. If you're smart, you'll listen to what Mr. Bronson and Maria have to say, and then you'll sign it. To make a decision, you will need a very short period of time, approximately until I leave here. If you choose not to listen to reason, I am ready to take Maria and my grandson out this door, and my media campaign will begin immediately. Highlights. You are lost, confused, angry, at the sudden end of your work, at the sudden revelation about Maria and Mr. Bronson, and, of course, about Matthew. That you became unstable, threatened to hurt Maria, hurt her since the last shoot, started taking drugs again. He saw the offended expression on my face. I know, well, I think I know, you don't like it, but I will use any means necessary to protect my little girl and our family's reputation. You may get a few minor slaps on the wrist if you fight me in the court of public opinion, but I guarantee I will destroy you. You understood me? It's strange that they somehow got ahead of me, was my first thought. However, I was confident in the truth and had good people on my side. It wouldn't hurt to listen to this little performance. But how did they do it? Okay, I shrugged. Let's continue, whatever it is. Charles looked at his daughter and Bronson, waving his open palm for them to begin. Duck started talking, and I immediately interrupted him. Shut up! Sit down and let my wife tell me. You'll have a chance. Maybe. Maria looked more excited than I had ever seen her, even on our wedding day. She continued to nervously twirl her clasped hands. Finally, she stopped and looked at me. "Chase," she began, "I'm really, really sorry this happened. This shouldn't have happened." I rolled my eyes, and she realized she had already failed. My wife took a deep breath and tried again. "Okay, no cliches," she said. I screwed up. Dak and I started talking, then became friends, and then, well, then you were out of town. Remember that week when you had to go to the island and reshoot those 2 scenes? I was at home and Duck invited me to dinner. He said he didn't want me to be all alone. She caught her father shaking his head and rolling his eyes. "It's quite difficult, Daddy," she admonished him. "I know I was stupid. Just let me talk to Chase." "In any case," she continued, completely unsettled, "we drank wine, danced. God, I know how fucking ridiculous that sounds, especially now that I'm saying it out loud. Chase, I love you. This has never changed. I was drunk. I barely remember it. It is not your fault. Honestly, it's not even his fault, although he had a hand in it. This triggered a mental image, and I almost lost my afternoon lunch on our expensive rug. Charles, for all his bravado about status, at least had the common sense as a man to apologize and return with a cool, wet towel. I accepted it. "Okay, let's skip all this nonsense," I said with disgust. "Did he breed you here? In our bed?" Maria choked back a heavy sob, receiving a harder slap from my words than my hand could ever give. "No," she answered dejectedly. "We rented a hotel room across the street from a dance club in Santa Monica." "Yeah," I laughed out loud. "He didn't want to miss out on an easy prey who happened to be involved in this accident, and he didn't want to let you sober up so much that you chickened out." Then Charles attacked him. "Enough, Chase!" She screwed up. "No one can deny that." I raised an eyebrow, and he simply turned back to his daughter. "It was just one time, Chase." She was speaking slurred, and now she was crying a lot. "I was so excited when I found out that I was pregnant. At my first appointment, when Dr. Fielding said that I was 3 months pregnant, not 2, I was confused. When I started counting in the car, I was devastated. I knew it was while I was with Duck. You were gone for 4 days, and on the 5th, you arrived so late that you went straight to bed. It was terrible. I hoped and prayed that Matthew would be ours so I could put this nightmare behind me." "This doesn't sound right at all," I said coldly. "It sounds like you would never have told me about your little indiscretion, and you certainly didn't when Matthew was born. You should have known. I've heard that women have a nose for such things. You were just going to let me raise that bastard's child?" For a moment, no one had anything to say. As I collected my thoughts, I realized that Duck was trying to say something, and, to be honest, I could barely look at Maria, the woman who had broken my heart in so many ways. "Come on, you idiot," I said, looking at the bastard. "I see you have something to say." But Dak was not used to all this. He had all the impudence and arrogance of a typical Scot, big, bold, and selfish. This was his usual behavior on and off stage. "She's too kind," he said. "Of course, it's partly her fault. After all, she was a little drunk. But I started working with her long before that night, on set, off set, and I always got my way." I jumped out of my seat as if stung. That damned old man Wilmington was a gazelle for his age when he tried to stop my fist from hitting Bronson in the face. Between my anger and the 2 of them, I never landed a hit, but I'm sure I made the video the highlight of our home security system. I immediately knew where Charles's thugs were hiding. That's not what I learned, but that they were fast as lightning, getting from there to here. A bone-mutilating hand gripped my shoulder tightly. Duck got the worst of it, as goon number 2 threw him into a chair and then slapped him across the face to calm him down. Bronson looked shocked. His gaze moved from the thug to Maria to Charles and then to me. "Chase," he said emotionally, and then began to cry. "I'm sorry. I never wanted any of this crap. This," he pointed at Charles, "or a child, none of that. Okay, I thought with my little head. I never thought about the consequences. I'm really sorry. But Chase, listen, old man, I want to make things right." "And how?" I asked, amused. "I will cry," he yelled. "All our fucking lives are on the line. You know what scandal does to celebrities. I will pay child support until Matthew turns 18. I'll pay for everything you think he needs, but you don't want to pay for. Hell, I'll even pay for college. Just take her back, man. I know it's a lot to ask, raising someone else's child, but you know you already love this baby. You're already attached. He'll never know who I am unless you two decide to tell him. I won't even talk to him. In his eyes, you will be his father. Anything else you both want too. If we ruin our images, our careers will go down the drain. I don't know about you two, but I need this lifestyle and money. He was pathetic. Charles supported him so much in the time that passed before I arrived, and now this big loser has already broken down. I looked at Maria with a raised eyebrow. She instantly understood what I wanted to say non-verbally. I let Bronson relax and looked straight at my wife. You know, I said, and then started again. You know, all this won't bring back my love for you, right? I hope you have already explained this to Daddy. Are you suggesting that we raise this child in a home without love or affection, just to save face? You understand this, right? To my surprise, Maria nodded affirmatively. I understand, she answered sadly and quietly. This is only until we establish ourselves in our careers. Look, Chase, divorce in Hollywood is like sprinkles on ice cream. It's always there and people are waiting for it. You need a new job. I need her too, but not now, when Matthew is still a baby. I don't expect anything from you in private, only in public, the performance of a lifetime if you like. It's all in Dad's post-contract. You can discreetly date whoever you want, and I can too, you know, for sexual release. I won't be against you. At home, I will treat you exactly the same as always. By the way, this will not be acting. I love you, and I regret that I ruined our lives. Both. I won't dwell on it or get my hopes up, but part of me will always fantasize about the day when, instead of handing me divorce papers, you tell me that you forgive me. The worst thing about this farce was that Maria seemed sincere. What a pity, I thought. I realized that someday I might even forgive her, but I would never stay with her. I took the envelope and began to look through the documents inside. If Maria had gone out with a man, any man, for sex without informing me, I could have started divorce proceedings. If she gets caught by the paparazzi or her indiscretions become public knowledge, same thing. In any case, financial affairs were working out in my favor. I looked at Maria, then at Charles. Why are there so many sections about her infidelity? I asked, amused. Why not write something legal about keeping her legs closed? This angered Charles, but he was in business mode. That's what all these points are about, he answered decisively. Same for you. Whether you and her ever make peace is of no concern to me. I don't care, and I hope you don't either. It's about reputation, mostly mine, but yours too. This is also an opportunity, a chance to deal with the consequences of her actions, a chance to learn how to raise a child properly, and trust me, if one of you screws up, I'll step in with some favors from one of my judge friends, and I'll take Matthew away. Otherwise, the child will be 12 years old, and you can both go your separate ways. Either way, this guy, he pointed at Duck, will pay for Matthew. He already knows what will happen if he misses even 1 month. Maria, I suddenly said, how did you manage to organize all this? This was definitely not done within a few hours of receiving the test results. I could see it, Chase. She said this with finality. You suspected even that last day on the island. Every day after that, you just moved away from me. God, I literally felt the love melting inside of you. I didn't have time to think. I had nothing to think about. I kept thinking about the steps I had already taken and which ones Charles had forestalled. I didn't have much choice. If I was going to launch a counteroffensive, and I was, then it had to be a new battle. I've already lost. Maria's story. After our meeting ended, I went and spent the rest of the day with my son. I needed this myself, but I also could not bear to meet my husband. Chase was an incredible man, the only man I could see myself with long-term, and I ruined what we had. Conversely, I knew I had to follow through for Matthew's sake. I didn't have fantasies about reconciling with Chase, no stupid plans to stun him, but there was no way I was going to humiliate myself. I didn't have any half-baked ideas. I wasn't stupid. I grew up in high society, among the smartest people in America. Dad owned 27 factories between western Ohio and eastern Pennsylvania. He owned 7 high-rise buildings in Manhattan. He owned real estate or brick buildings in almost every country, on both American continents. He also had a lot of people. As soon as I suspected that Chase might know something, I called my father. Within a few hours, he had a whole team of people, dedicated to him, of course, working on a solution to the problem. Most likely, these were his trusted legal and PR teams. By the end of that day, after dozens of text messages sent back and forth, he had helped me out of a potentially disastrous situation. Damage control at its best, and certainly what I expected from my father. After all, he deserved it. He built an empire for his family. I always counted on my dad, from as early as I could remember. Even as a student, I realized that most rich assholes were too snobby, or rather, pretentious and ridiculously narcissistic. When Chase Burrows made a surprise visit to our first film class at UCLA, I was beside myself with excitement and lust. After class, he stayed and signed a few autographs. When his eyes met mine, he, too, seemed to be struck on the spot. I almost fainted when he invited me for coffee. For us, this was the beginning. The fact that Chase was only 3 years older than me was a surprise and a plus for me. The affair was hot and heavy, and I was in a starry sky. My father, not so much. Just as he planned everything else, my father also had a plan for me and my life. He didn't expect me to be so intractable. Perhaps it was my DNA that contributed to my stubbornness in living the life I wanted. It was I who directed the marriage train, making subtle hints at every step. I was over-dramatizing my interest in the Desolation Island script and how much I wanted to be part of a show like that. The baby was Chase's idea, and I reluctantly agreed. As much as I loved Chase and wanted with every fiber of my being to grow old with him and bear him more children in the future, I had to admit that I had a character flaw. I loved attention, simple and clear, from both men and women. I thrived on it. As for women, envy has always driven me crazy. That's why I always tried to dress up better than all the other women at the party. For men, it was more related to sexual attention. The tense, thick air as I stand in a group and talk, knowing that a cute guy is fantasizing in great detail about what he would do to me at this moment if we were alone. And of course, the occasional soft, quick touch on some guy's arm or hand. And then I try to figure out if it was intentional or not. The differences between my lack and my love were clear. When Duck first attacked me, I brushed him off with the ease that had become familiar to me since my breasts grew. But he continued, and this, in itself, fueled my desire. At some point, the dance turned into sexual tension, an itch that I desperately wanted to scratch. In the end, I allowed myself to be seduced by him and used him to satisfy my burning need. So the question remained, could I ever be a good and faithful wife to Chase or anyone else? It was a big question without an answer, a question I couldn't answer with complete certainty. This means that I had to play the combination that I got. No, the combination I chose myself. I did it. Now I was determined to be a good mother to my son and a good wife to my husband for as long as he lived with me. I didn't expect it to be very long, but I hoped the pain would subside and we'd all be in a better place when he finally decided to end it. If he played the victim after what we proposed, or couldn't bring himself to have sex with me anymore, then I would probably go on dates with Duck from time to time. Hell, I probably would have had a few more dates with the hot actors I now knew. Chase. I signed the papers under pressure, not because of Charles's thugs, but because of my indecision. Being able to outmaneuver or put Charles in his place and punish Maria and Duck would be a triple win for me. I asked a few questions about using nannies when we were both working and other unclear language. I'm sure I missed a lot too. Charles seemed quite proud of himself. He made no gesture of goodwill as he took the signed papers and stood up to leave, throwing my unsigned copy on the table. He simply kissed Maria on the cheek and quietly told her not to screw it up. His guards followed him and closed the door. Now alone, Maria and Duck were silent, finally turning to look at me. "Bring me a beer," I ordered Maria. "And you fucking nut, why are you still in my house?" Duck stood up and tried to hug her, to which Maria refused, turning away. Bronson left without another word. Maria returned, having straightened her sad face, and handed me my drink. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but thought about it and turned away. "Maria," I said softly as she turned back, "it's over between us, just so you know. I've already met with a divorce lawyer, so I'm all set. Obviously, Daddy forced it to be put off, but don't think his stupid maneuvers will turn me into a smug cuckold." "You can't," she said in the same soft tone. "That's what Dad said." "It's on hold for now," I corrected her. "Don't try to force me to get close to that bastard of yours. I won't watch him, I won't babysit him while you have sex with other guys. I will do my best to treat him decently, like a child, like a person. Otherwise, you and I are, at best, roommates. If I can find a way to fuck you all, I will. Make sure Dad knows it too. You will receive my schedule in advance. According to the contract, we will be seen together in public twice a month, depending on the filming schedule." She wisely kept her mouth shut. This selfish bitch was no idiot. She and her father won this round and gained some time. I left soon after, called Sal, and met him at the little bar next to the studio where celebrities go when they don't want other people snooping around. "Man, this is terrible." He said this with compassion. "I'm sorry, Chase. What are your thoughts on the next step?" "I didn't think," I answered a little absent-mindedly. "I just reacted. I need to soak it all in over the course of a day or so. I'm not even sure I can do anything. Charles has plenty of resources." "Nonsense!" he exclaimed, his tone becoming more animated. "You won't give up, do you hear me? We need to start developing a plan for retaliation. I need Chase Burrows at his best for a new project. We'll start with Bronson. Any man with red blood will feel better about this. Tell your lawyer what happened, that you were coerced. Ask about other scenarios, too. Learn from him for your new role. Find out if he thinks you should assign a private investigator to Maria for a while. Start making a list of her habits, such as how she spends time outside the home. See if you can install tracking software on her phone." Okay, Sal," I laughed in response. "I understand. Play hard, and I will play. The post-contract is actually very fair to me. Wilmington hates me, but it was like he was trying to teach his daughter a lesson." We sat in silence, sipping our drinks. I knew what Sal was thinking. Moreover, I knew what exactly he was thinking about. His wallet. He was counting on another hit show. For some reason, he also decided that I was the key to success. The last thing he wanted was to have to find a new leading man. Still, I wondered if he had a history of heartache that helped him through this terrible situation. Sal was a friend and a good guy to have on your side in this town. My visit to the lawyer the next day did not go as I had planned, or should I say, how I wanted it to go. He read the post-contract and set it aside, shaking his head. He thought of everything, that's for sure. He said with admiration, "That's why he's Charles fucking Wilmington." "So, what do you recommend?" I asked, not sure what I wanted to know. "What's our next step?" "Next step?" he answered, stunned. "Nothing, at least that I can think of. He put himself in an advantageous position by putting you in an advantageous position. All you have to do is work, have fun, have sex on the side, discreetly. And when you're done doing anything and everything you want, go home. There is no clause about breaking wedding vows. There is no clause about treating her like crap. That is, within the bounds of the law. On the other hand, if she screws up, you get everything. Everything that was in your marriage. I doubt she'll go hungry with a family like that." "Are you saying that I should just sit back and accept it?" I asked incredulously. My temper was growing with every second. "That's not what I mean at all," he replied. "I'm saying he completely overplayed his cards. Mr. Wilmington is not the kind of person who does this by mistake. He got you into marriage, in a house with someone you probably want to strangle at the moment. Essentially, he forces both you and Maria to coexist, perhaps mature, at whatever level of torment you both choose. All restrictions lie on her. She can't take the child or the money and run away. She cannot be caught in the public eye in any scandal, sexual or not. If she wants to sleep with you, she even has to warn you in advance. Otherwise, she risks losing her son. "You're not even the main character here, Chase," he said, leaning forward. "What?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You are a prop, a tool," he continued, his face showing how much he enjoyed Charles's skill. "He's using you to make her see the bad things he's done." When my mother was 17 years old, she and the boy she loved decided to take a summer break from each other. She got drunk at a party and had sex with some smooth-talking guy, and that guy turned out to be my father. When it turned out that she was pregnant, her parents forced her to marry my father. They were incompatible, they had no common goals, and my mother was heartbroken over what she had done to that other guy she loved and he loved her. But my parents succeeded. There are dozens and dozens of terrible examples when almost nothing worked for them. They are only 2 years away from their 40th anniversary. They worked hard and got it done. I'm not saying you should, just that it is possible. I needed to think about this. I didn't want it to turn out like this. I wanted to kill them all, but I needed to get my head in order. If Maria really was at a disadvantage, she would quickly find out about it and run to Dad with a complaint. But this was not entirely true, I realized. The Pope has already laid down the law for her. In the end, I decided that Sal's advice was the best. First, I need to get even with that idiot Bronson. I needed to get my manly reputation back by dealing with Duck, and then maybe screw him. Charles threatened him about alimony. Knowing Charles, he would probably fund Bronson if he ended up being an unemployed actor or worse, and he would have done so if I had anything to say about it. That first month on the home front was tense. An icy tinge has taken over the once happy marriage. Maria tried, but I was sure that she was just practicing her acting skills. If she asked me to do something that I wasn't going to do, I yelled at her. If she asked me to do something that was once a given in our marriage without asking, I would yell at her. She became very irritated, and I became unhappy. As a result, I spent most of my time in the local pub. This put me in a position where I found myself surrounded by very attractive women from Southern California who clearly wanted to party with a celebrity so they could write about it in their diaries. The 3 times I used it, I was already pretty drunk and the sex wasn't memorable. Being cautious, I met them at a hotel a few blocks away. After the first time, I really felt guilty. Perhaps it was my conscience telling me not to behave like Mary. After the first month, I began to spend more time at home. Maria was kind, but at the same time she gave me a wide berth on the days when I was especially angry. It was like we were both learning and practicing a new dance. Matthew required a lot of attention from his mother, and these numerous interruptions did not allow Maria and I to even talk properly. At the end of the second month, I received a call from Sal and immediately went to the studio. That evening, I sat in the living room and read the pilot. Maria dispassionately asked what I was reading. She knew it was a script. I put the booklet down and looked at her. "My new role," I told her. "Sal has a new role for me. It's the lead role in a new TV drama, and there's no one else in the mix." Maria perked up and asked a few more questions about the role. Finally, she wanted to know when filming would begin and where. "The city scenes," I said, "are filmed in Atlanta. If all goes well, I'll be leaving in 3 to 4 weeks. By then, we will make sure we have a reliable nanny. This will give you a little time to find, some relief." It took Maria a minute to understand what I meant. When she finally understood, she flew out of her chair and ran to her room, sobbing. Of course, Maria's father called me the next day to scold me. "Chase." He got straight to the point when I answered. "I was very kind in my offer, much more than I intended. Stop treating my daughter like crap. I'm only telling you once. Next time, you'll be introduced to some new guys from my security team. They will help you understand." "Leave me alone, Charles," I hissed into the phone. I agreed with your bullshit scheme. That doesn't mean I have to like it or her. That's exactly where you're wrong, he said categorically. Don't test me, young man. I heard the phone click, disconnecting the call. The old bastard still had a rotary phone, I guess. Duck's first few payments were made, in my name no less. Through Sal, I learned that he had been offered a small role in a new reality show, but for some reason he didn't make the cut. It meant Sal took care of it. On the home front, I didn't apologize to Maria, but I tried to treat her better. This turned out to be very difficult for me, given that she constantly tried to start a conversation and often asked when I was going to stop being angry with her, stop shutting her out and sleeping separately. On the last evening before I left for Atlanta, Maria came into the spare room where I was sorting out my clothes and finishing packing. I looked up at her and saw that the naked beauty was hanging on the doorframe as if on a copper pole. If I was going to do without it, I would have immediately told her to fuck off. Be that as it may, no strings attached sex was a top priority in Atlanta. I laughed a little mischievously at her attempt at seduction, and her smile turned into a frown. I just nodded towards the bed, directing her with my gaze. No matter how desperate she was, the nonverbal hint was enough for her. She lay down on her back. I looked down at her for a moment. Maria looked expectantly, and I signaled for her to turn her back to me. She looked disappointed, but damn it, I didn't want her to see my disinterested face. I fucked her with great force. Sweat poured down my forehead. Maria accepted this without protest. We must give her credit. As soon as I reached the finish line, I went to the bathroom to clean myself up. When I came out, Maria was no longer there. She probably had thoughts that after this we could hug. This morning, I quickly ate a bagel and orange juice before heading to work. Maria never came downstairs. While I was waiting to board my flight, I received a text from her. Couldn't even say goodbye? I replied that I didn't want to wake her. We both knew this was complete nonsense. My first day was wasted because the film crew didn't have time to find the best angles to shoot the building that was to become my law office. The end of the day more than made up for it when Sal introduced me to my assistant. Chase Burrows, Sal said, introducing himself. This is Jazz, pronounced Jazz. Jazz, Chase Burrows. The shitty grin on her face and his told me she might already know what exactly goes into this job. Jazz was a sophisticated woman, stylish in dress and appearance, but radiating an outward sexuality. I'm not a fan of giant breasts, and her breasts were large, but at least they were in proportion to her nearly 6-foot frame. Her brunette hair was shoulder length and shiny as a new penny, highlighting her dark brown eyes. By the 4th day, we had the actual set in place, and we filmed the intro to the show. Me driving a Porsche Carrera in the city center, driving down a city street, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase, the weapon of any good lawyer. In the evenings, Jas and I would go out to dinner with other members of the cast and crew. But that evening, it was just Jazz and I. When I asked if she wanted to go to a club after dinner, she shocked me. Should we just go to your room? She asked with a sweet smile and a tilt of her head. She received an order, and undoubtedly from Sal himself. When we got into the elevator at our hotel, 2 large men walked into the cabin with us. I didn't like their look from the very beginning. They didn't say anything until Jas and I got off on my floor. Jas's room was 2 floors above mine. Mr. Burrows, said one of the large men, Mr. Wilmington would like to speak with you, sir. The request was not formulated as a question. Jas looked worried, but I knew what was going on, and I was furious. I should have at least taken into account that Atlanta is in Charles's home state. Jas, I said, turning to her, go to your room and I'll call you in a while. She nodded, still worried about my safety. I kissed her on the cheek and headed back down the elevator. I thought about trying to snitch on those 2 thugs, but I just wanted it to be over so I could go back to Jas. It better be good, I said, turning to them. They didn't flinch as they continued to stare at the elevator door. I followed them into the room, but they stopped me and seated us at the counter at the back of the bar. The first thug took out his phone and tapped the screen, then placed the device on the table in front of me. Charles's face appeared on the screen. His tone was quiet, but direct. "Good evening, Chase," he began, without waiting for an answer. "I'm sure you know why we started this little conversation." "I have no idea," I snapped, "but your timing couldn't have been worse." "I'm sure." He cleared his throat. "Chase, do I need to remind you? Maybe ask one of my assistants to reread the agreement we signed?" "I don't think so," I growled. "Are you implying that I somehow violated it?" "No," he said, leaning closer to the camera, "but you were going to do it." "I see," I mimicked. "It looked like I was going to do one of those things that was clearly stated in our agreement." "Why are your fucking clowns after me, Charles?" "Language," he cursed. "You were going to break the clause." "The agreement specifically states, discreetly." "I was careful, idiot." Now I was furious and could not contain my bitterness. I lashed out at him for following me and told him he could shove his post-contract up his gold-plated ass. Charles seemed unharmed, watching stoically as I exhaled. "Unnoticed," he replied when I was exhausted. "Means unnoticed, Chase. If my boys feel that others might see and draw conclusions, you know the paparazzi, they let me know. Understand me, guy, your invisibility is at my discretion. I also don't like your assistant. I made inquiries about her. Tell your boss to find you a new one, or I'll talk to him myself. I thought you were a smarter person who knows your limitations when it comes to me. And you're starting to piss me off, Charles," I answered decisively. "Go check on your slut and stop trying to control my life. I told you that day in my living room that things weren't going to be the way you wanted them to be. I'm Chase fucking Burrows, and I'm strong enough to hold you. I signed your contract thinking that you would behave honestly. Now I see that you just like to manipulate people. Want to learn some hard lessons, Charles? Do you think you won this game? You don't even know the rules, but I'll be happy to teach them to you." I felt something pressed into my chest under my arm, and everything around me went dark. At some point, I suddenly woke up, floundering in the hotel pool located next to the recreation room, wearing only my clothes. I tried to scream for help, but no sounds came. One of Charles's guards pulled me to the side and then pulled me out of the pool. They carried me in their arms to the entrance of the hotel, and then carried me into the service elevator. I began to come to my senses when we reached my floor. Then I started to fight. The second thug hugged me from behind, while the first one used the key card on my room door. I was thrown to the floor as they entered and quickly closed the door behind us. Fearing for my life, I stood ready for a mortal fight. My first weak blow was easily deflected, and the return one hit the left kidney. I immediately fell. Then I felt a quick and strong kick to my right. I rolled on the ground in agony and was hit in the groin. "Mr. Wilmington wanted you to know," one of them told me. "This is his game and his rules. Don't leave your room until morning." One of them threw the key card onto my prone body and they left. Finally, I crawled to the bathroom and got into the shower. Looking in the mirror, I realized what kind of beating I received, one from which absolutely no traces remained. I still don't understand whether they used a stun gun or a contact stun gun at first. There were no holes in the skin in the armpit area, so it was most likely the latter. The next morning, my lower back hurt badly. I carefully went down to the studio's private buffet for breakfast. Not seeing Jas, I messaged her but received no response. I began to really worry about what Charles was capable of, in addition to, of course, having me. However, Jas might just be angry that I didn't call her like I promised. One of the managers came up to me while I was eating and told me to stop by Sal's trailer before going on set. When Sal saw me walk through the door, he asked his two assistants to leave. When everyone had left except the two of us, he offered me coffee and sat me down at the table. I did this with great discomfort. "Jesus, Chase," he asked, shaking his head. "What happened to you last night?" I took a few minutes to tell him exactly what happened. "Listen to me," he ordered. "Jas is finished. I had to let her go early this morning. What the hell, Sal?" I interrupted him, stuttering. "Why did you do that?" I could tell from the look on his face that I didn't want to know the answer. "That Wilmington thing," he continued, "is so deep up your ass you'll need a colonoscopy to get it out. I was on the phone at 6 this morning with the governor. The fucking governor of the great state of Georgia. He informed me that it had come to his attention that many of our permits were not in order and that he would be sending several people to all the sites. I was about to defend our process when he took a breath and said, "If you remove Chase Burrows' assistant, don't hire another one, and keep him on a short leash. I think I can look past this. Fucking Wilmington plays golf with this guy 2 or 3 times a month. They are woven into each other's athletic straps. What do they say? A stitch on a timeline? Like this." "In English, Sal," I raised my voice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "This guy," he replied now with disappointment evident from his features. "He wants a piece of your ass. Badly. He has connections in this state. In Washington, too. He has the governor in his pocket. That's what's happening now, Chase," he continued. "And don't be upset. I'm hiring you for a security team with the money I saved on the new jazz. You're my biggest asset in this project, so it's worth it. I don't want to see you on stream or on social media with a woman. Understand? I'll have to let you go, and that would be a breach of contract. You have to do your job. Forget about your personal life, about that bastard, and about Maria, too. Lay low for at least a few months and put all your strength into this show. I need you. A lot depends on this. And whatever you do, don't piss off Wilmington." After a 10-hour day and running a good portion of the pilot, I was exhausted. I borrowed some painkillers, and just before returning to the hotel, I borrowed more. After dinner with the film crew, I went to my room. I decided to contact Maria, realizing that I needed to at least stay in touch, at least in order to get ahead of her father. "Hi, Chase," she said cheerfully. "Good to hear your voice. How's the show going?" Funny, she didn't ask how I was doing. I ignored her stupid question. "Oh, I'm doing great, thanks for asking," I joked. "Last night I was tortured and then beaten by your father's charges right here in our hotel. So everything is just great for me." There was a painful silence on the other end, and then, "I'm sorry this happened, Chase," she said sadly. "I talked to Dad this morning, and he told me everything. I heard what you said to him because he recorded your conversation. FYI, I begged and begged him not to do it again, even though I was outraged by what you said about me. He promised me that he had made arrangements with the studio to make sure this didn't happen again. Fucking family, I thought. Hell, I was going to get back at them one way or another. I might even be willing to die to do it." "I see," I said sternly. "So, have you been in trouble before?" "Let me guess. Daddy is probably looking the other way. Did you have sex with Duck in my absence? Or was it someone else?" "No, Chase," Maria said, almost in a whisper. "I learned my lesson. I want you and only you. Of course, this sounds like the script of a cheap romance novel, but I will remind you of this as often as necessary. I know you're still angry, and I know you well enough to know that you probably will until you get over it or get even. I'm going to help you, at least today, get started. I'll wait until you get home, and then you can pound me into the mattress like you did the night before you left. I will accept any punishment you want, but please stop playing games with Daddy. We both know he doesn't like you at all, and if you give him a reason, well, I don't know what I'd do without you." God, she was delirious, among other things. However, her cryptic warning about her father probably hit the mark. I told her that I would maintain a short relationship with her if I survived her father's wrath. I knew that she was upset, that her impressive speech did not soften me at all, but I stopped caring. Half an hour later, there was a knock on the door of my room. I looked through the peephole, and there stood an attractive, slender woman. She was dressed tastefully, but with a hint of promiscuity. I asked through the door what she needed. "Your wife sent me," she said, seemingly embarrassed by my reaction. "Send you for what?" I asked. "I just talked to her and she didn't mention that someone would be coming to my room." "What do you need?" "There is a desire?" She looked down one end of the corridor and the other, as if she was looking for someone, or maybe someone who was out of my field of vision. I came at her request to have some fun? The last word was formed as a question. "I don't believe you," I said adamantly. "I worked today. Leave and take Charles's thugs with you." She was puzzled and stood there for a full minute, trying to figure out whether she should leave. Finally, she turned to the elevator, and that was the end of it. 40 minutes later, Maria wrote a message. "Why did you send her away?" I called her immediately. "What are you talking about, Maria?" I asked sourly. "How did you find out about this?" "Because," she sighed, "I sent her. I already told you, well, sort of, before. She is an expensive escort. I know Dad ruined your fun last night. I told you I was going to start making amends." "First of all," I grumbled, "I don't trust you or your father." She nervously looked left and right, waiting for me to open the door. "I'm sure it was a ruse, so your father's thugs could shoot me again." "No," she answered sadly. "There was no one but her. Dad doesn't know that I heard her." "Bullshit," I shouted half-strangled. "Secondly, I don't need pity from you or anyone else. Have you forgotten who I am? Anywhere in America, I can just walk up to a woman, show her my $1,000,000 smile, and just ask, 'You remember who you married, right?' 'Yes, I remember,' she said even more quietly than before. 'I'm sorry that everything is so bad. When are you going to come back home?' 'Probably another week to 10 days, I told her. "Do me a favor and move my things to the spare bedroom downstairs. And make sure the other 2 guest rooms upstairs are clean and ready to use." "For what?" she asked. "It's none of your business," I answered sharply. "Just do what I ask. Soon you will see everything." The next day, I visited Sal's trailer for the second time in as many days. I threw the check on his desk. Call me old-fashioned, but I always carried only 2 checks with me in case the need arose. "What is this?" Sal asked, puzzled. "Payment for my protection," I stated frankly. "You can put it on deposit or advance it like all our other expenses. But in any case, I want to make sure that Charles will not be able to close it even for a short time." Sal was a smart man. In addition to being a wealthy film company executive, he most likely had ties to the Jewish mafia in Hollywood. I knew that his cousin part-owned one of the big porn studios in the valley. It took him no more than a few seconds to understand what I said. He simply nodded and put the check in his drawer. I threw myself into my work. Many on set who had worked with me before quickly noticed that I was not the Chase they were used to. That last week in Atlanta, they saw a dark, evil side in me. I tried to convince some that I was just getting into character, hoping it would work. By the time we finished filming, when our crews were packing up and heading back to the studio, people called me Tom Cruise Jr. Tom was a bastard on set and made everyone miserable and anxious. I entered my house 9 days after my last conversation with Maria. Mark Templeton and Davis Reggiano were with me. Both were huge men, but, they assured me, very agile. The list of celebrities they had worked security for was impressive, to say the least. Maria looked shocked when I presented them to her. I asked if she had prepared dinner or would be ordering, and asked that I bring my 2 friends' orders before calling. I escorted the men to their rooms so they could get settled. After dinner, it turned out to be takeout. After putting Matthew to bed, she asked Id to talk in private. "What is it?" she asked, upset. "Why are they here?" "You know why, Maria," I said ambiguously. "Or at least you should know. Daddy Muscles better not mess with me anymore. Tell him, okay? If you care about me as you claim, then tell him. I'm using every resource I can to finish off his ass." It was melodramatic, but I felt much better protected. "Chase," she looked demoralized. "Just stop it all, please. We can move forward. I know you hate him, and probably me, but challenging him will only make things worse. He doesn't lose. Ever." "Stop, Maria," I said in a more subdued tone. "Just stop. Fuck your father, at least for a minute. You made it. You had sex with Duck and got pregnant. You ruined the lives of many people, including your son. You made a fool out of me, and good old Dad is just finishing the job. Stop acting like everything will ever be okay between us again. This is wrong. You never apologized to me, and now, after all this time, I don't care if you do. You have a man, not a husband, under contract. Threats and intimidation. You have an illegitimate son with whom I will never connect my life. You will never work in this city again if I have anything to say about it. At best, you'll be on cheesy talk shows, playing the victim, and that will be your source of income, unless your dad takes you in at some point. From time to time, I will probably have sex with you for pleasure, just like any other fan. In the end, your sweet daddy and I will have a showdown. I will play the long game, scheming and figuring out how to eventually destroy him. So stop hiring prostitutes and trying to make amends, I finished. We are no longer one and we never will be. I will stick to your father's agreement, but all the love we had is already dead. Maria's head dropped, her shoulders slumped, and she walked away. Fine. I finally got through to her. Maybe now she'll understand. Maybe she'll call her father and tell him to go and kill me. The work was good for me. People forget about gossip and old news over time, especially in Tinseltown. Sal treated me better, and I felt more confident in my investment. Playing lawyer was also good for me. My character was the proverbial good guy, a family lawyer with a conscience and morals. Most of our episodes were loosely based on some Dateline saga or strange internet stories about abandoned spouses, mostly husbands. I returned home in the evening, usually had dinner with my guards, played cards, or watched baseball. Maria tried for those 2 weeks after I told her everything to remain in my company. She would tell me about her day, or what Matthew had done. I listened, but usually answered in very few words. There was no affection, no friendship. Maria became increasingly despondent. When the 4th month began after the loud revelation, Maria hardly spoke at all. A few weeks later, I was pulled aside on set for an urgent phone call. Maria was taken to the hospital. A neighbor was looking after the child. I left in a hurry, mainly because of how it would be received on set. Most of what I did these days was almost entirely dependent on my image. The doctor walked up to the nurse's station and pulled me aside. "Mr. Burrows," he began, "your wife, to put it simply, had a nervous breakdown. She suffers from severe depression, which is most likely related to the postpartum period. It is rare for an attack to begin so soon after the baby is born. Are there other events in your life that could be considered traumatic?" I had to think twice about how to answer his question. I didn't want to be made to look bad or for someone at the hospital to spill the beans and cause a scandal. I just told the doctor that I had started a new drama series and it could be causing a lot of stress in our marriage. I lied when I told him that Maria seemed to feel sullen because she was attached to the baby and couldn't stay in the spotlight. I said I found it a very difficult adjustment. I didn't know what else to say or if he even believed me. When he finally said that I could see my wife, I hesitated for a few moments. I'm sure he realized it, judging by the way he frowned. He led me to Maria's room. She looked peacefully sleeping. Under the influence of medication, she seemed calmer than I had seen her in months. It was hard not to sympathize with her. I pushed all my love away, hid it like a squirrel hides nuts. Some of it spilled out, and a deep sob suddenly escaped from my insides. Sitting next to her, I slowly dozed off. After a while, I heard her softly calling my name. "Chase," she asked as I stuttered awake. "What are you doing here? Where's Matthew?" "Matthew is fine, and he's with the nanny," I said. Well, I'm still your contact number. What happened to you?" "I don't know," she answered with alarm. "I think I'm just tired. I always dreamed of raising our child together with my husband, as if on the same team, even before I met you. Now I think I need to get used to doing it on my own. Have you talked to the doctor?" I told her what he said and what answers I gave. We discussed what and how much she should say. I also reminded her that Matthew was not our child, and that was the only problem that got us where we were. I asked her to be careful, not to let anything slip when she was asked questions. It's strange, but the more we talked, the more we came to some kind of truce. "Chase," she finally said, "I don't want to fight with you. I know what I did to us. First I got involved with Duck, and then I dragged my father into this. I regret all of this. I think it will help us both if we just try to be polite to each other, no matter how difficult it may be. I don't know if I have the strength, Maria. I was honest. I can't turn off anger, just like I try to turn off love. Her eyes widened, and I raised both hands up, palms facing out. I knew you still loved me, even if just a little, she said softly. I can only repent if you allow me. If you want to have sex with another woman, just bring her home. Take her to your room. I won't interfere, and you have your guards, so Dad won't be able to cause you any problems. When Matthew is old enough to remember everything, we'll have to come up with something else. I'm not asking for us to get back together. You've made your feelings clear, and I understand them. I just think if we try to be friendly, we can get Dad out of our lives. I can't raise my son alone when he's breathing down my back, and you and I are constantly in conflict. Yes, I answered. Listen, Maria, I'm just so damn angry about everything. I didn't mean to crush you, although you probably deserved it. We just never talked about what happened without your father's intervention. I can't promise that we will be friends. Or at least I can't promise that I will. But we can try. In the meantime, you need to be strong for Matthew, and I will try my best. The next morning I talked to Sal. I wanted him to hear what I had planned and relayed to him my conversation with Maria. We talked until the director knocked on his door. Listen, he instructed. I think you are doing the right thing for yourself and for everyone else, and certainly for the child. Chase, I've been in this business a long time. Some of today's actors, as you well know, were the sons and daughters of other famous people. Some, perhaps a disproportionate number, find out later in life who their real father is. I'm not telling you to accept it, although many before you have done so. It depends on you. Your main problem right now is that bastard, Charles Wilmington. You get rid of him, and that gives you and Maria a second chance to figure things out on your own. No matter how this ends, that's what I did. Most of the time, up until Matthew's first birthday, I remained calm and sometimes cold with Maria. She seemed to understand, or maybe just accepted it, as punishment. I didn't feel comfortable bringing a woman to my home, so I cautiously set up dates online via email. When I first met a woman named Rebecca at a hotel on the coast, Charles's goons showed up, but my boys started a fight. I think none of them wanted to lose their lives because of an enraged father-in-law and a cheating actor. A cheating actor, that's what I was now, if only because Charles had outplayed me. I pushed this thought into the farthest corners of my mind. It was Mary's fault anyway, I told myself. I was acquitted. Matthew's birthday party was the first time I saw Maria's family since she was released from the hospital. It was the first time I saw Charles since the big reveal in my living room. I knew you'd see things my way, Charles's stupid voice said, coming up behind me as I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. I see you and my daughter get along well, my boy. I turned to see his face, somewhere between an evil grin and a smile of satisfaction. God, he was delusional, living in an alternate universe. Hi, Charles, I said, trying to fake my own evil grin. I haven't seen your henchman for a long time. There's no need anymore, son, he replied, patting me on the shoulder. I felt like I was dirty. You've learned some valuable lessons since we last spoke. Competing with my muscles was wise, but learning to be more careful was even wiser. You're a fucking idiot, you know that, I spat. You still think that everything will end according to your plan, don't you? I can't wait to see the look on your face when you get knocked over. Trust me, I will be there to see it. Well, Chase, Charles chuckled. I was only being reasonable. First of all, I never expected you to forgive my daughter, did I? Hell, if her mother did something like that, she would quickly go missing. Secondly, I gave you the best way out of this situation. You will have your own life, she will have hers, and my grandson will not grow up to be some kind of perverted psycho. 9 or 10 years, and you can move on with your life. They say that everything a child needs to learn, he will learn by the age of 5. This is where I hedge my bet. Time flies, Chase. You just keep being as smart as me. You will get freedom, and I will preserve the integrity of the family. I wanted to go to the kitchen, take a knife, and plunge it into his damn throat. He knew, as did I, that over time everything would calm down, even normalize. He was counting on it. But I'll show them all. He changed the subject. And one more thing, Chase, he said more seriously. I was looking after Mr. Bronson. I see he's having trouble getting any meaningful work. I suspect you have something to do with this, and I admire that. In the next few weeks, I will send a revised version of our agreement, which states that in exchange for your continued cooperation, I will pay him child support if he flies the coop, and will also make monthly payments to a college trust for Matthew. I don't care, I shrugged. He is your family, not mine. I don't care what you pay for. Just do it and restart the revised agreement. I do not need money. Give them to Maria directly and she can detail what she is buying for the child, including food. Of course, young man. Charles grinned and playfully hit me on the arm. Certainly. He then walked away to join the celebration. One evening, a few months later, when I returned late from a date with a fan, Maria was sitting in our living room with a glass of wine, waiting for me. I told my guys I'd see them in the morning, grabbed a beer, and sat across from her. It's so late, and you're not sleeping. Why? I asked. Problem sleeping. No, she sighed in response. I want to ask you something. She hesitated for a few moments, as if trying to find the right words. I just waited, sipping my beer. Do you think I could become one of your fans? She asked sweetly. Just from time to time? What? Do you want to have sex with me? I laughed at her. Her poor, sweet face sank. Maria, I said more seriously, the problem is not physical. The thing is, I don't trust you. She looked at me sadly, one tear rolling down her right cheek. I know, she whispered. I'm just asking for a favor. I don't deserve this, but I haven't had sex with anyone since, well, the day before you left for Atlanta. It was the only time since that day that Dad and I were ambushed right here in this room. The next day, I decided that I would try celibacy. Either that, or secretly like you. Secretly. But I decided that I did not want to be a woman, a wife, and a mother in a twisted, broken marriage that was not a marriage at all, and at the same time, be a cheater. Even if I was invisible, I would still know what I was doing. The therapist I see after my breakdown thinks I made a good choice. She calls it courage, but I don't know what it all means. I just feel so terrible guilt for what I did to us, you know? Damn, she seemed sincere. And yet, I didn't know. I was clearly wrong about her all along. When I talked to her about my problems, she told me that I should learn to deal with things by thinking about them. She told me that since I live with you and still love you, I should just ask you. She told me that if you say no, then I will end up where I am now, except I will have the answer, and then I can make other decisions based on it. You see, Maria, I said, leaning forward, this is trust. I want to believe you, but I just can't. Sure, I still find you attractive, but inside, well, I just don't see how we could be together. That's fair, Chase, she replied, as if I had thrown her a bone. I'm just asking. I see you every day, and then I use my toy thinking about you at night. Maybe it sounds stupid to you, but I still think about you. Sometimes I watch one of your episodes. You look damn sexy in a suit. Basically, if there's anything I can do to convince you, just say it. I thought for a moment. Okay, I said. No promises, but we'll need condoms on hand if I ever decide this is okay. Oh, she said, amazed. You don't believe that I'm not dating anyone? That's not true, I said quickly. I'm dating others, and I don't want Matthew's mother to be at risk. Maria smiled, but it was because of the loneliness in which she was. Her expression showed her pain at even bringing this up. I'm going to bed now, Chase, she said flatly. Thank you for listening to me. 2 weeks later, while we were filming the season finale, I received a message with a photo. It showed Maria in the sexy negligee I gave her for our first anniversary. Under the photo, it was written, I hope you want to celebrate the finale tonight. I know what you said, and I'm sorry if I'm being pushy. I just can't take it anymore. Please. That night, I had sex with Maria. I asked Mark and Davis to take the day off so we could be alone in our house. There was no love, It was amazing and very sad to me that I could have sex with my wife like I had sex with all the other women. Our love was truly dead, and I know she felt it too. Over the next few months, Maria and I had sex a few nights, and then it slowed down to once a month. Time passed. I threw myself into work. The show went very well. Maria attended Hollywood events with me, as we agreed with Charles. 2 years in a row, she stood next to me on the red carpet at the Emmys. We went to dinner a couple times a month so we could be seen. All this time spent on my own island of despair. I planned and plotted, trying to find the perfect way to get revenge on Charles. I admitted to myself that I was unlucky. I couldn't think of a way to hurt him without committing a crime. I thought about committing a crime, believe me. I was just too afraid of going to jail. A handsome actor who plays a lawyer on television, and even behind bars at a meat processing plant. No thanks. No matter how normal I acted around Maria, she, and I'm sure Matthew, internally worried that I had not become close to the boy. She tried her best, and I have to give her credit for that. I simply could not be anything for the child other than a surrogate, maybe like a distant stepfather, I suppose. I had no desire, and every time I thought about Bronson's actions, his offspring made me sick. One of the few bright spots during these years, at least something that broke the monotony, was his friendship with Julie. Her real name is Rebecca, and she occasionally appeared on the show as an opposing lawyer. Our on-screen courtroom antics were appreciated by the fans, but I appreciated her differently. We often had lunch together, and eventually she talked about her life. What struck me most about Rebecca was her strength. She had a particularly shitty life. She was the adopted daughter of an abusive stepfather, which escalated into an abusive relationship with her #1 husband. Having finally found a way out, she fled to Southern California and almost became a woman of easy virtue. The people behind this were rich and powerful, not some seedy pimp. Such are the ways in this damned city. After that, she became a recluse and a patient of a very good psychotherapist in order to turn her life around. She made an impression on me that I was not fully aware of. She gave me the courage to open up about my predicament and the sad state of my life. We quickly became good friends, and I admit that she was very attractive in other ways. Hopefully there will be time for this to develop. During the second week of filming season 6, Sal called me into his office again. "Sit down, Chase," he told me, smiling widely. "I think I have very good news." I sat down and Sal lit one of his signature huge cigars. "My boy," he continued, "have you been following Duck Bronson?" "No," I answered. "Not for a long time." "And what?" "I'm not sure you knew," he began, taking a few puffs on his cigar. "Ever since he was blacklisted, he fought for his life and eventually got a job with my cousin. This is Porn Albert, if you don't know. Bronson has a huge piece of schmuck dangling between his legs. This time, I didn't have to get my reference book out. Yiddish for dummies. However, it made me angry. "Fuck you, Sal," I growled. "What do you mean?" "Easy, damn it," he coughed as he exhaled. "I think I have a wonderful gift. Bronson has picked up a little blight and has been out of work for the past 2 months. Just last night, Albert was telling me his heartbreaking story. He plans to move back to Norway to be with his family." "How will this affect me?" I asked. "Well," he stuttered, "you know the bad side of Hollywood, that we're into human trafficking, not drugs. Well, if you can convince Maria, I think I can help her and the baby disappear along with the boy's father. That is, unless you decide to keep it." I was shocked. Not by Hollywood's dirty secret, but rather by his ability to move 2 people like that. I admit I had to think twice about his last comment. I have lived in this farce for so long that I have become accustomed to it. On the other hand, Rebecca and I had been in a long-term affair, and lately she had been discussing what-ifs more and more often. I was in love with her. I knew that for sure. The more I thought about it, the more attractive the idea became. I told Sal to give me 2 days. Maria was also shocked by my proposal. I asked her to call Duck and discuss it. The first thing she decided was that she wanted to stay with me and finally, once and for all, settle our differences. I pointed out the obvious. I would never treat a boy fairly or with love. I'm sure she understood the reality of this. I told her, in a conciliatory manner, of course, that if this had been an isolated incident that had not resulted in offspring, I might have forgiven her indiscretion. I don't know, Chase. She hesitated, lost in thought. I don't even know if I can live with this man. It hurts, Maria, I replied. You once chose him over me. What made you do this? Maria seemed startled by this question. I wondered what exactly she was talking about with her therapist. Yes, she finally squeezed out. He was handsome, of course, but he was funny. He made me laugh. But other than that, I think partly because I was doing something forbidden. Well, it's not prohibited in this city, I reminded her. Listen, your father holds you within stricter limits than I do. He's been trying to make you into the person he wants you to be for 6 damn years now. If you think things will work out between you and Bronson, then why not? The next evening, she told me that Dak was not only not against this idea, but also that he had never come to terms with the fact that he had a son, and he had no rights to him. He was afraid of Mary's father, and they talked about it for a long time. I asked her how she would handle it with Charles. She surprised me with her answer. I love Dad, but fuck him, she said, adamantly. The more he tried to help me, the more he ruined my life. Now I see his motives as they were, as they remain. Events developed quickly. Sal told me to tell her there would be an appointment. He handed me the phone so that I could give it to Maria. Dak should not have taken any part in this. If the lovers wanted to be together, he had to go alone and wait for Maria to contact him as soon as she arrived in Europe. Matthew's 7th birthday was quickly approaching. As usual, it took place at the Wilmington mansion. Games, clowns, and bouncing objects were the order of the day. I felt no remorse about what was about to happen. Karma, not revenge, was going to have a real party, and I would be watching it happen. Even paying for the flight was worth it. 2 evenings before the party, I sat with Maria and drank wine. Matthew was put to bed early as they both had tickets for a 5 a.m. flight. The first leg was legal, but I was asked not to ask anything after the first destination. I studied Maria carefully, accepting her. Her infidelity to Duck still angered me sometimes, but now I had to admit that we had come full circle. I was losing her again, but this time I was sacrificing her so that we could both have a better life. She looked up at me, emerging from her dreams. What? She asked, teasingly. I was just thinking, that's all, I said, a little sadder than I wanted. Will you really be happy, Maria? I think so. She paused for a moment. Obviously, not as happy as I would be with you. She immediately waved me off, seeing that I was about to attack her. I know, she continued. It's all my fault. I just sometimes think about us, how things would have been if I hadn't ruined everything. I love you, understand? And I will always love you. You will always come first in my heart. But, she continued, I lacked character. Maybe even now there is not enough. I had privilege and I would like to blame it on my rich parents, although it seems unfair to me. I just hope I made you happy, at least in those early years. I really want you to think of me fondly whenever I come into your mind. She was crying. And for some strange reason, I was close to it too. I lived with this woman for 8.5 years, most of which were torture. I wondered why it was so emotional back then. Maybe I sympathized with her, or just felt sorry for her. Do you think everything will work out with him? I asked, trying to change the subject. Like I said, she shrugged. He's not you, but he means something. Otherwise, I wouldn't deceive our lives. I hope his family will help him mature. She chuckled a little through her tears. I think a girl should work with what she has. I nodded. I really felt sorry for her. The biggest mistake of her life brought us here. I hoped that for her sake, Duck Bronson would still become a father, perhaps even a worthy husband, and they would live happily ever after. For me, I was looking forward to starting a closer relationship with Rebecca. 2 days later, on Saturday, I stood in the elegant office of Charles Wilmington and drank very expensive whiskey with the old bastard. The alcohol was going well, and I was mentally preparing myself for the acting job of a lifetime. I held out my glass for another serving. "Where the hell is she?" Charles stuttered, looking at his watch. He was getting impatient. "That damn woman never arrives on time?" The way we worked it out was that I would fly in from Boston, and she would fly in on a later flight from Los Angeles. The new season of the show was filming in Boston, so Charles had no doubt. By that time, he was mostly leaving Maria and me alone. "Well," I grinned, "she's your daughter. And she often reminds me of your many character flaws." "Yes, of course," he returned my grin, mimicking me. "You must be very lucky to have experienced some of these shortcomings yourself." I would say that, at least for you, it was a learning experience in many ways. "You know, I'm still planning on frying your ass, right?" I told him with sharpness in my voice. "And you will never see it happen." "Okay, Chase," he laughed, "if that's what you want." "Think about this," he continued indifferently. "Everyone learned something from this fiasco. Maria probably learned the most, but so did you, Bronson, and even Maria's mother. I did what was required. Can you ever become the kind of person who will do what is required, even in the face of difficulties? Now you know how insignificant you were in my plans, but you shocked me. I expected you to lose your temper that day. I expected that I would have to deal with you in a completely different way. But instead, you controlled yourself. These days, very few people in my sphere of influence challenge me. This makes me sad and also boring. It makes me feel like I'm losing my skill. If you want to try, I'll be glad. Trust me. However, think about this. Mary is a different person. I was convinced of this. And to some extent, this was facilitated by the way you reacted to my ultimatum. She will never make such a stupid mistake again. And as corny as it may sound, she will do almost anything to make it up to you for the pain she caused. You've grown up too, son. Now, he reasoned. You are this boy's father, whether you like it or not. And as much as I admit that I once despised you, I have to say that you were a good father and a much better provider, even under stress, than I could have imagined. This statement made me flinch slightly. He was so engrossed in his righteous decree that he didn't even notice that I was anything but a father to Matthew. He didn't even ask his own daughter. I admitted that she could have lied to him, but still, another inflated balloon filled with hot air and excrement. I want to say, he continued, I respect you, and you deserve it. However, even then, I knew that very few men could bear what Bronson and Maria dumped on you, so I gave you a way out. If you want to leave, I'll reschedule it until next year, on Matthew's 8th birthday. According to our agreement, our family will keep our comments to ourselves until the divorce is finalized. Great, I said in pretty good old English style. Charles gets what he wants again. Hooray, jolly old fellow. We both heard the doorbell and moved towards the front of the house. Maria's mother stood there with the envelope, white as a ghost. She closed the door when the courier left. Her eyes suddenly fell on Charles, completely shocked. He said it was from Mary, she said to the old man, almost in a whisper. The look on Charles's face made me wish I had taken a photo of him. He frantically opened the envelope and began to read. What is this, Charles? She almost begged. What is written there? Charles read without stopping. I suddenly thought about his old heart. I didn't want the bastard to die, but I wanted him to feel deep, gut-wrenching pain. This is from Maria, he said, not in the same authoritative tone that I had ever heard. She is gone. Where did you go? Cried Mrs. Wilmington. She writes that she is abroad. He tried to speak and comprehend the words at the same time. She won't come back. She writes to tell me not to look for her. She writes that she hates Chase, and me too, for interfering in her life. She writes that she has found the man of her dreams, and he is ready to become a stepfather. My God, what's going on? Maria's mother lay curled up on the floor in the foyer and sobbed. Charles finished reading and dropped the letter. In fact, it simply fell out of his hands as the consequences hit him hard. Finally, he looked at me. I also had a sad face, as if sharing his suffering. About 5 minutes later, as Charles's wife rose to her feet, I slowly allowed a wide smile to appear on my newly upset face. Charles looked at me as if he had never known me. "I believe, old man," I said in my best cheerful tone, "that you have violated our contract. Have your lawyer call mine and negotiate the amount of compensation. Don't force me to send my people to recover. Have a good day." I didn't have any people to send, but it was so fun to say. Both of Mary's parents stood in the doorway and watched me leave them for the last time. Before putting the car in reverse, I took out my phone, took a photo, and saved it for when Maria could contact me to let me know she was okay. The rescue boat has finally landed on the shore of my island of despair. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.